Hype plane, hype plane. I have here the big new hype plane that everyone wants to see. I mean, yeah, it's okay. Hello. I am Aoyala Ipe, and I like to hop into top tier matches in War Thunder and then personally kill the entire enemy team by myself. Welcome to my channel. Hello everyone, welcome to the new Spearhead patch. This update has some new planes that are legitimately actually interesting, and there are no outrageous game-breaking bugs like usual. So this is already one of the best patches in recent memory, far above average. We have a fun game that works, and that is, I'm not gonna say that's the best we could ask for, but it's definitely the best we could hope for. And the most fun, most outrageously overpowered, and overall best plane in this patch is, of course, without any shadow of a doubt, the new Hawk 200 RDA in the British tech tree, the little folder thing that you probably didn't even notice was added. Yeah, I love that thing. It's absolutely nuts. I went 14-0 in my first match ever with it, even though the controls are bugged. Gaijin did eventually fix it. As I said, there were no major bugs, but there were some minor ones. And before you ask, I'm probably going to take my sweet time with the Hawk 200 RDA and really enjoy the little bugger before I make a video on it. Instead, today I'm covering the big new hype plane for this patch. This is the new Su-30 MK2 AMV Flanker from Venezuela, which is incredible timing on Gaijin's part, given that the United States is currently threatening to invade Venezuela, although that hasn't happened yet, at least as of the time of recording. By the time this goes live, who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. Anyways, this is a premium for the Russian tech tree, and I'm just going to call it the MK2 for short, and this jet can be yours for the completely reasonable, not at all ridiculous, price of 80 actual goddamn dollars. And if you insist on buying, 80 bucks worth of digital jet, at least use my custom store link so I get a commission. You also get a slight discount, and you get my my custom decal as an add-on for free, which is awesome because it's an awesome decal. I'm not using the decal in this plane though, because I just felt like going old school and using the skull props, like I used to. Anyways, when I first saw the MK2 jet being added at 13.3, I looked at it and I was like, okay, that's a free video, because that thing will be overpowered as hell. And I was really surprised by how clunky this jet was. The MK2 is not bad. It is legitimately a pretty good plane if you know what you're doing, but it has a lot of quirky rough edges that I didn't expect, and it took a while to sort out how to deal with those so I could start going on absurd killing sprees. Alright, so the 2-second summary of the MK2 is that it is a glass cannon. That means the selling point is pretty straightforward. It has a metric assload of firepower. It has 10 missiles at 13.3. 4 of those are R-73s, which are extremely good, the best short-range dogfighting missiles in the game. And 6 of them are R-77s, which are named RVVAE here because that's the export name for them. Now, R-77s are basically the worst Fox 3s that are still good. It's a little easier to dodge, has a little bit of a shorter range than, say, an AMRAAM, but it's a perfectly fine missile. And you get 6 of them, which is an awful lot of firepower for 13.3. The downside, however, is that this jet is not super survivable. So the key to flying this thing well is understanding how to not die, so you can then bring your completely absurd amount of firepower to bear on every goddamn person in sight and kill them all for the lulz. And what this means is that if you get ideal circumstances, the MK2 is utterly terrifying. For example, this match here had almost ideal circumstances, so abracadabra, the entire enemy team is gone. I made it disappear. The only problem is that was the biggest snooze fest of a massacre I have ever seen, and I have standards for my content. Trust me, you already saw the interesting bits. I know I'm laughing, but it's legitimately not a joke. It actually was pretty boring. And there's a reason for that. I'll explain why in a few minutes. So I decided to go find a more interesting team to annihilate 20-0 and, like one that put up a little more of a fight and show you them dying instead. And that's what you're seeing here now. So this will be the actual featured match of this video. Okay, so if you aren't aware, the Su-27, the Su-30, 33, 34, 35, the J-11s, etc., are all the same family of aircraft, usually just called flankers. That's the NATO reporting name for most of them. Now, in game at least, They tend to have a ridiculous number of missiles, like a lot more missiles than any other planes at their battle rating, but they have a relatively small number of countermeasures and pretty bad energy retention. So what this means is you have a jet that has an awful lot of firepower, sometimes an awful lot of very short-range firepower, that is very bad at sustained evasive maneuvers. Like, that's not really their strong suit. So if there's a high-threat environment, the best way for flankers to survive is by using their huge number of missiles to attack from the longest range they can. This can get a bit awkward because R-77s have a much longer range than the R-73, which are the ultimate short-range dogfighting missiles, right? So it's very common for new players, noobs, to be like, I have all these super dope short-range dogfighting missiles, so let me just charge into that furball over there and unload them on everyone, while being totally unaware that their plane itself is not really built for that kind of fight, even though the R-73s are. So a big part of playing both this plane in particular and any flanker in general is learning how to not take your own bait. And the way I'm going to do that here is I'm mainly going to be using just the R-77s early in the match when it's still a very high threat environment. I haven't thinned out the enemy team. And then I'm just going to be dumping my R-73s to get a tactical reload going. I'm either going to be jettisoning them or spamming them off in wild Hail Mary shots that are almost certainly not going to hit. And I can do that because this is TTA, Top Tier Air Arcade, so I have enough ammo to kill the entire enemy team by myself, and that's exactly what I'm going to do here. Again, this is actually a big reason why top-tier air realistic players tend to like flankers a lot more than top-tier air arcade players. Players in realistic tend to be a lot more spread out, and they also tend to have a lot less missiles since they don't reload, and also there's less players because they don't respawn. So realistic winds up being a much lower threat environment overall. Flankers thrive in low threat environments but struggle in high threat environments. So in arcade you have to shape the ideal environment for this thing to do well, while in realistic, the right environment is often just handed to you right off the bat. Okay, but enough about flankers in general, let's get to this plane in particular. In this plane, the MK2 has two weird quirks that will get you killed if you don't know about them. Well, one of them will definitely get you killed, one of them will probably get you killed. So the weird quirk that will definitely get you killed, like 100% guaranteed to screw you over, particularly if you're a new player, is that the RWR, the radar warning receiver, has blind spots. Here's a 3D model of the blind spots courtesy of StatShark. It's true that other radar warning receivers have blind spots, but the MK2 has giant gaping blind spots directly above and below it, as you can see. The radar warning receiver really only covers the sides of the plane. It does not cover the top or the bottom. And if a radar missile comes through one of these blind spots, your RWR will not warn you. Now, thankfully, if you know about the blind spot issue, then having bolt from the blue surprise missile deaths will not be a huge issue for you. Because remember, the blind spots are not top or bottom relative to the Earth. They're top or bottom relative to your plane, and you can turn your plane sideways. And if you turn your plane sideways or spin a little bit or whatever, then that changes where the blind spots are pointing. And then your RWR will tell you if there are any incoming missiles, so you just have to change where you're pointing periodically. Instead, the real practical issue that most players will run into here is they will get surprised by missiles they knew were coming but thought they had dodged. The reason why is that you often have to point the top or bottom of your plane at an incoming missile if you are taking evasive action. An awful lot of players have gone in the habit of taking evasive action, and then they know the evasive action works when the RWR stops yelling at them. That's how they know they dodged the missile. But if you do that with the MK2, you will get a lot of false positives, because the RWR doesn't tell you anything if the missile's coming at you from directly below or directly above. And that means you'll get a lot of very confusing missile deaths. There are two very common ways this can happen. The first is when you try to outturn a missile, because that usually involves turning sideways and pulling hard, that will often mean the missile is in your blind spot. The second common way this can happen is when you're trying to multipath, because you're flying very low to the ground, any radar missile coming at you will be coming at you from above. And if you're in the MK2, coming from above you means coming through your blind spot. So it's very easy to get in a situation where you think you've multipathed the missile when you have not actually done so and it's still coming to kill you. Now, the way you deal with this issue is you can't just rely on the RWR. You either need to look at the missile itself that's coming at you and see if you've dodged it just by looking at the damn missile, or you can look for that little plus silver line notification you get for dodging a missile. If you dodge a missile, that will often pop up. You can also take an overkill amount of evasive action that you're not sure when you dodge it, but you know you must have dodged it at some point. Or again, you can just spin your MK2 a little bit and change where your blind spots are pointing. This plane would have been much simpler to fly if Venezuela had enough money to buy a decent radar warning receiver. Actually, now that I think about it, a lot of problems would be solved if Venezuela had enough money. And the fact that they don't is kind of crazy when you realize that Venezuela, fun fact, has the largest oil reserves in the world. Like, they have more oil than Saudi Arabia. But their economy has collapsed so hard that it triggered a bigger refugee crisis than the Syrian civil war. Like, it got so bad that at one point they ran out of food. It's really sad. Anyways, though, this is a War Thunder channel, so let's focus on the plane. Now, the other big quirk with the MK2 is that it's heavier and has worse engines than other flankers. What that means is if you take a full load of gas, this thing is an absolute brick. Now, I know you're like, but every jet has better flight performance but has less gas. And yes, that's true. But the effect on this jet is extreme. This thing cannot handle a full tank of gas. It's like the difference between 80% fuel and 100% fuel is night and day. And this is a whole different plane at 50% fuel. So if you're an average player, you'll want to just play around for a few matches and figure out the minimum amount of fuel you can get away with taking. Trust me, it makes a huge difference. And how much fuel you can get away with taking is directly tied to how long you are able to survive for. So this is a plane that sort of balances itself with skill. You know, the better you are, the more fuel you take, the harder it is to fly. This actually gets very interesting for another reason, because this jet has the ideal battle rating and the ideal amount of firepower for a record run. People have already sent me proof that they have come close to beating my 41-0 world record with the F4 Ice. But the limiting factor for them is fuel. Not how much fuel they can carry, but how much fuel they can carry and do well. It is very, very hard to get the flight performance necessary out of this thing for a record run, while also carrying enough fuel to last for a very, very, very long, extended match. That means that for most people who are trying to do a record run, unless the stars align perfectly, they will almost certainly need to land for gas at some point. And that's rough, because if you've just killed 30 or 40 people in a row without dying, and you land for gas, people will be lining up to kamikaze dive through the AAA cover to kill you. Trust me, I've seen this happen to myself plenty of times. And then I have to polish the lobby off with a backup, and it's 30-1 or something instead of 30-0. There are enough MK2s floating around that I would be surprised if no one broke that record eventually, but I personally think the Su-34 would be better suited for it at this point. There just aren't as many Su-34s around because it's a tech-free jet. Someone did send me proof of a 34 kill streak before he ran out of gas, and then he popped it back up and it was over 40 kills. I told him that if he uploaded a screen recording of the replay, I would link it in the description. As of the time of recording, I don't know if he's actually done that, but if he does, it'll be linked in the description. Alright, so let's start getting to the conclusion here. While the MK2 is an absolute monster under ideal circumstances, I found it to be a below-average 13.3 jet under non-ideal circumstances. Whenever I was in a match that was something more than just blatant seal clubbing, I would just sit there thinking, ah, god damn, a MiG-29 SMT or one of those 13.3 F-16s with spam rams would be doing so much better right now. While the MK2 does have more missiles than those jets, in a competitive environment, it can be hard to actually use all 10 missiles on this thing. If the stars align, you can use all 10 missiles over and over and over again and do a hilarious amount of damage. But that's the exception, not the rule, and it's also just, again, boring seal clubbing. That's what happened in the match I fast-forwarded through at the beginning of this video. Oh, and speaking of seal clubbing, I finally found that F-105 that was bombing my team's base, and he's just gonna J out when I start attacking him, so I guess I accept your surrender, dude. It did in fact count as a kill. Anyways, a significant portion of the time, you can only effectively use the 6 Fox 3s on this thing. You can't really get close enough to use the R-73s and survive, at least in arcade. However, the MiG-29 SMT and those F-16s also have 6 Fox 3s. And their flight model is a lot more survivable, and that means they can use their 6 Fox 3s better than the MK2 can use its 6 Fox 3s. So in a real fight, those other jets, the MiG-29 SMT and the F-16s, would actually have something of a firepower advantage in practice, even though they have fewer missiles. So those other jets are better under most circumstances, even though this thing is the best jet under perfect circumstances. And I'm not gonna lie, seeing what I got each match was really fun. It was kind of like gambling, except I didn't have to pay every time I rolled the dice. In fact, I didn't have to pay at all since Gaijin gave me this thing for free, because YouTubers get free stuff, yippee! And I would have played the MK2 a whole lot more if the Hawk 200 RDA wasn't so much frickin' fun. And y'all will be getting a video on that plane, even though no one cares about the British tech tree, particularly at top tier in arcade. I know that is quite the niche. Okay, but anyways, that brings us to the big question. Should you buy this thing? Is it a good premium to buy? And, well, yeah, it actually is a pretty good premium, but it's also $80 frickin', Jesus Christ. There are places in the world where you can hire professional hitmen for less money than that. But yes, this is actually a pretty solid plane. It's not overpowered and has some quirks, but it is a pretty good jet and you'll have fun with it. Even if its price is equivalent to 6 months of income for your average Burundian. And no, that's not a joke. That's really how much this thing costs. If you want to buy a premium to grind the Russian tech tree with, your two main options are this jet and the MiG-23ML. Both this and the MiG-23ML are both really fun and really good in arcade, but the MK2 is the clear leader if you're playing realistic. The MiG-23 nerfs didn't really affect arcade if you're new here. So if you play a mix of both game modes, you'd probably be happier with the MK2. On the other hand, if you're looking for just a premium in general, you don't care which tech tree is in, you just want to get a good premium and then grind the tech tree, most players I think would be happier if they just waited until Gaijin added a premium F-16 or Gripen with AMRAMs, and Gaijin will eventually do that because Gaijin loves money. Just whatever you do, make sure you buy it with my store link. I get a commission, you get a small discount, and you also get my decal for free, and my decal's awesome. So, as you can see, abracadabra, I made this entire team disappear as well, 20-0, just like I said I would. Thank you for watching, like and comment to feed the algorithm, and if you subscribe or ring the bell, you won't need to remember how to spell AOE LivePay next time you want to watch one of my videos.